Italy has its famous Leaning Tower in Pisa. Every year, millions of tourists flock to get their pictures taken with it. But did you know that we have our own leaning building, right here in Normandy? Caen's Church of Saint-Jean. If you look at the arches on either side of the church's entrance, you'll likely notice that the columns aren't parallel. From there, if you look up, you'll see that the bell tower is leaning. So, why is that? To answer that question, we have to go back in time, because this church isn't the first one to have existed in this spot. This particular version of the Church of Saint-Jean was built between the 14th and the 16th centuries. It replaced an old Romanesque church which was already here before. In fact, forget the 14th century, there has likely been a place of worship in this area since the 7th century.
Nous savons qu'au 7e siècle, il y a une première chapelle. Ensuite, il y a probablement en effet une autre église, mais dont nous n'avons aucune trace. Donc celle qui existe aujourd'hui a commencé à être construite au 14e siècle.
In 1417, during the Hundred Years' War, English forces led by King Henry V laid siege to Caen. Saint-Jean was damaged in the fighting. Then, during the French Revolution, the church was closed down and reportedly converted into a saltpeter plant for a few years.
Donc ce qui en plus a abîmé l'intérieur de l'église. Et ça, nous sommes dans les toutes premières années de la Révolution en 1792.
Elle sera rendue ensuite à l'Église catholique derrière.
Elle sera rendue à l'Église catholique après, à partir de 1802, avec l'occasion du Concordat entre Napoléon Ier, donc empereur des Français, et puis l'Église catholique.
About 100 years later, it was classified as a historic monument, prompting repairs by the French government. And then a century after that, it became one of the rare buildings in Caen to survive the Allied bombings of the Second World War.
Au moment de la libération de la Normandie, de la bataille de Normandie plus exactement, le quartier du centre-ville de Caen, en particulier l'île Saint-Jean, ont été l'objet de bombardements systématiques. Et si bien que tout est détruit. Alors nous le voyons très bien sur les images qui sont ici. Toutes les maisons, on ne voit plus que des gravats. On ne voit même plus les très beaux hôtels particuliers qui constituaient ce quartier-là. Et au milieu de toutes ces pierres, il y a l'église Saint-Jean qui est éventrée, qui n'a plus de toiture, qui n'a plus de vitraux, mais qui se tient là, je dirais comme un signal d'espérance, de dire que cette ville, elle peut être reconstruite.
Post-war, it was architect Marc Briot de la Jaudière who led the reconstruction of Caen and worked to stabilize the church's foundation. By 1969, it also had new stained glass windows, blue, red and gold in color, designed by Daniel Perret.
Vous avez le baptême de Jésus dans le Jourdain, avec Jean le Baptiste auquel cette église est dédiée, et au-dessus nous avons la colombe. Donc c'est un ensemble qui fait que quand nous entrons dans cette église de Saint-Jean, nous sommes pris par la lumière, pris par cette élévation, et vraiment c'est une vraie merveille.
The church we see today is made up of a mix of styles. It's a good example of flamboyant Gothic architecture, but it's also had some Renaissance features added over the years. In fact, if you walk through the church, you can quite clearly feel the change of era within the architecture. As you walk down the aisle, it's dark and a little ominous. But as you get further in, the church takes on a different appearance. It becomes a lot brighter, almost luminous. So, the Church of Saint-Jean survived through multiple wars, through bombings, yet none of that explains quite why it leans. The real reason is actually quite a lot simpler than all of that. See, like much of Caen, the church was built on marshy ground. In fact, the area it was built on originally used to be an island.
Et ici, nous sommes, ça ne se voit pas, mais nous sommes sur une île.
Une île qui n'est plus une île aujourd'hui.
Une île qui n'est plus une île aujourd'hui parce que tout a été reconstruit après les bombardements de juin de 1944 et les différentes rivières ou fleuves passent sous les rues.
Over the centuries, because of the soft ground, part of the foundation sank, giving the Church of Saint-Jean its iconic stance. It's also why the lantern tower was never finished. Presumably, when someone realized the ground wasn't doing a very good job of supporting the church's weight, construction was interrupted. If it hadn't been, maybe we'd have the buried Church of Saint-Jean today, instead of the leaning one. And so, though its lean may not be as pronounced as that of the Tower of Pisa, and though it's also a little bit shorter, by about 10 metres compared to its Italian counterpart, the Church of Saint-Jean has stood here for centuries, through wars, through suffering, but also through times of peace and prosperity. Is it a bit quirky? Maybe, but it's definitely one of Caen's most unique landmarks. Thank you for watching this episode of In a Nutshell. All of the research for this podcast was conducted by Juliette Portala. You can find all episodes of both this series and full Why Is That episodes on wrnc.eu, as well as on our YouTube channel.